Alright, so today I'm going to take a Nerf Zombie Strike Double Strike, and I'm going to rip this apart and paint it. I'm not going to do much or any modification to it. If I do anything, I may use some black tape, black electrical tape or something like that to put underneath this O-ring, just so it fits a little bit tighter in this plunger system, so it forces a little bit more air through. And I may also put some washers or something on here to help compress the spring a little bit more. But for the most part, this is a Smart AR system, and I don't mess with them because Smart AR systems have a tendency to not work whenever you start screwing with the air restrictor, because the air restrictor is part of the Smart air restrictor system. So, duh, yeah. And I've already ripped this apart and took out the internals. There's not much to it. It's fairly simple. So I didn't film that. There's also a lot of videos that do film it. But I do suggest that you take photos once you lift off the top piece. Take all the screws out and take off the top piece. Just take photos if you don't think you're going to remember where the parts go, because that is important that you remember where they go. This one's fairly simple though. And this is my first video on this channel. I normally have another channel called Zola's Props and Cosplay, where I make things like this Punisher vest. And initially I was going to do this for the channel, but every time I put videos like this up on that channel, nobody enjoys them. So this here is kind of in between. It could be used for cosplay, but I personally am going to use it for my own family Nerf wars. I'm going to keep this as a last-ditch backup third weapon. I have primary, secondary, and then the last-ditch backup, which would be this two-shot one. And my secondary is a Ballistic Ops Dart Zone, pump action, rival style gun. And so I didn't want to replace that with this as a secondary, but I thought, you know, this would be cool. So now that I've taken apart, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start sanding this all down by hand. For all the large areas here, I will be using a sanding block. Okay, so this sanding block here is essentially just helping me scuff up everything so that whenever I apply my primer coat, it should take pretty well. And you want everything a little scuffed up. It will help the paint to adhere. I don't necessarily, unless I'm being really obsessive, sand off all the paint or graphics. Just need to rough it up to help the paint adhere a little better. Okay, so I'm going to go through and sand each one of these pieces. And once I'm done with the sanding block, you can tell the areas where you missed because they'll look smooth and won't be quite as dull or scratched up as the areas where you did. And I'll use sandpaper to just smooth out the other, rough up the other areas so that the paint will adhere. So now that they're all roughed up with my 320 grit sandpaper, there is one thing I'm going to sand out of existence, and that's this warning right here. I'm going to use some rough grit sandpaper and sand that out of existence and then smooth it out again with some 320 and some 600. Okay, you will notice that I did not sand off the double strike. If this was purely for cosplay, I would sand that off too. But all I did was just remove the warning there. And next, I took an old but clean towel, and I got it damp, not wet, but just damp, and wiped off all the excess sanding dust. And just to make sure I get everything out of the nooks and crannies, I have my airbrush. There's no paint or anything in it. I'm just using it for the air compressor purpose. I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that I blow all the dust and everything out of all these little nooks and crannies and spaces where my damp towel isn't going to quite reach. The air brush compressor, useful for so many other things. And now that everything's been sanded, I'm going to take Duplicolor Vinyl and Fabric Specialty Coating Paint. It's a flexible finish ideal for dashboards, door panels, seats, carpet, blah 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 blah. And it's sold at AutoZone. This is like $8 for a can. It's a little pricey, but if you really want any external colors you're going to paint over your primer to stick and not chip off real quickly and easily with a scratch of a fingernail, if you've ever painted a Nerf gun, just regular spray paint, even high quality spray paint, you'll notice a lot of times it just doesn't hold up. This stuff helps out a lot. I mean, if you take this through a lot of Nerf wars or to a lot of comic book conventions, yeah, you're still going to get some wear and tear and probably have to touch up or repaint. And for touch-ups, things like testers and model masters are great. But for primers, Duplicolor on things like plastic, whether it's a Nerf gun or say a toy gun you're doing for cosplay, perfect. Okay, I have my back wall here covered with this big sheet of cardboard here that you can see I've used for many different spray painting jobs. And if my voice sounds muffled, it's because I have a respirator on. I'm also wearing eye protection. And the reason for that is you can't be too careful whenever it comes to dealing with things like spray paints. They're very harmful for your respiratory system, your eyes, everything. So always wear mask and eye protection. If your hands are going to be near it, you should also probably wear gloves. Well, you should, not a should, you definitely need to wear gloves. You don't want this stuff getting on your skin. It's very toxic, very toxic. Just going to go through here. Some nice, thin, even coats over it. Part of the reason I place these on cardboard is so that I can rotate the cardboard, that I will be able to get the paint down in the trigger and everywhere else that I need to get these nice, well-coated black. And this particular one that I got is matte black. So it looks really shiny now, but whenever this dries, it will dry to a nice matte finish. Okay, so this is all nice and painted up. Now, if you're doing this strictly for cosplay, like I said, this is more for Nerf Wars, I would have taken the orange barrel out and apart, and would have sanded that and painted it too. But since this is for cosplay, or sorry, since this is not for cosplay and just for Nerf Wars, I did not paint the trigger, or the barrel, or the hammer, because I don't want it to look too much like a real firearm. And you may want to leave the tip of the barrel orange for cosplay as well. Most conventions won't let you in unless you have an orange tip. If you want part of the barrel orange, you can just mask off the end, of course. Okay, so now that I am waiting on the shell pieces to dry, I took this barrel assembly part here, and I put out this plunger tube. And on the plunger itself is a little black O-ring. I've removed this O-ring by sliding a screwdriver underneath it and just popping it off. Next, hopefully this will show up on camera. You can probably see a line right above my thumb here in this black electrical tape. I cut that in there with an X-Acto knife. I'm going to peel off a thin strip and wrap it around here just a couple times. So this O-ring is a little bit tighter and it fits a little better and forces a little more air through the chamber. Alright, so I have reapplied my O-ring here underneath my black tape. Next, I took a cap off of my Gorilla Super Glue and I cut the center section out of it. And I've taken and I've been hand sanding it down so it's level. Now, you can always just stack up some washers or something instead of doing this, but I didn't feel like buying any, and this fit. Now, as you'll notice, it has a taper, and where I cut the section from was from this line here to about a little bit more than a quarter inch this way. And it's about 5 millimeters, if you want to measure it in millimeters. I've been gradually sanding it down smooth, and this here is going to slide onto this orange post, just like this here. I slide it onto the post, and then I insert the spring. So when you have it back in here, you have a little bit more compression right off the start. So whenever you pull the hammer back, you have a lot more force than what you originally had. And that'll help to push this tighter O-ring through the plunger tube itself and give you a little bit more power. And also, now that you have a tighter fit and seal between your O-ring and your plunger tube here, you're going to need to grease this up pretty good. I already put some in there. I think I'm going to add a little bit more. And what you want to use is silicone or an artificial synthetic grease like that, not like petroleum ball bearing grease. That won't be very good. Alright, here you can see that I've reassembled everything. And I'm going to go ahead and put the top back on and screw this back together to make sure that it works before I bother painting the rest of it. Okay, so the reassembly was successful. However, I had a little bit too much electrical tape around here, so I lowered it down to just one layer straight around it. And I bought multiple versions of this. And what I mean by versions is they're all essentially the same, but different production runs. Sometimes I feel like there's little differences. And this one actually even initially feels tighter in the plunger tube than the very first one I bought. So I don't know if they've tightened up production or maybe just got a different O-ring. I don't know what's different, but this definitely is somewhat different from the last one. But with this extra little quarter inch or so of spring compression, it definitely does help this immensely. So totally worthwhile and totally works out on that level. And that's pretty cool. And I wouldn't do very much more compression than a small, 4 to 5 millimeter space like this, because with these plastic internals, the more you compress the spring, or if you put a souped up stronger spring, you usually need to get a piece to replace this as well, or you need to beef it up with some washers or something, because it will eventually blow through this. And I've literally souped up Nerf blasters only to have them explode the first time I shot them, because the plastic internals just couldn't handle it. So now that I know this is successful, I've taken all my screws and pieces, put them in this little tin here, so I don't lose them. I'm going to go ahead and reassemble the plunger tube and set all this off to the side, and I'm going to begin painting this. Alrighty, so for the hand painting portion of all this, what I have here is some Model Masters enamel gold and some Model Masters enamel silver. I think it's actually silver, yeah, silver chrome. I also have just some black. And I've gone ahead and thinned these out with some mineral spirits. And the reason why I did this, they're way too thick on a brush straight out of here to just paint onto much of anything. Now if you want to use acrylics or something that doesn't have like a 48 to 72 hour cure time like these do, there's plenty of acrylics out there. The ones specifically for painting Nerf guns, you can just Google some brands. They're on Amazon and places like that. You can find them pretty easily, but I've never found them locally in craft stores. But the main of this is going to be silver and gold, and some of the other flatter areas I'm just going to dry brush the gold so that it has more of a tarnished look. It's going to be heavier in some of these textured areas. The grips, however, I am going to use some acrylic brown on, just dry brushed on as well. So this one's going to be pretty simple. There won't be really any masking or airbrushing or anything. I may airbrush the brown onto the handles. I haven't decided yet. But for right now, I'm just going to start with the hand painting. Alright, next I'm going to be filming a time-lapse segment where I paint these by hand to get an idea of what I'm doing. And hopefully that will give you your own ideas for your own projects. Okay, so a couple things that I did here off camera were I did put some brown here on this handle. That's pretty much it. Everything else was in the time lapse. And one of the things I hope, if you watched it, was for you to take away the fact that, I kind of start in the center here and then work my way out. And that's so I have the outside edges to hold on to while I'm holding it and positioning it so I can paint the center. And it's always good to have an idea of what you're going to do before you start into it. That way you can begin and work your way around. Otherwise you may end up smudging it or getting your hand in it or something like that. So it's always good to think out what you're going to do first and plan it out in your mind before you actually start painting. And of course this is by no way meant to be like a step-by-step guide, but this is just an example of what I've done and how it looks so far. Alright, so the final thing I did, which I didn't film this either, didn't seem necessary, was I took some clear acrylic gloss coating. Now they don't sell this at Lowe's. This doesn't even have a ball on it. And this was gifted to me about a year ago, and I never thought I would use it. And a year ago, when I was painting a Nerf gun, I've been having a problem with the lacquers and acrylic and enamel gloss coatings or matte coatings that I'd been purchasing at Lowe's and Home Depot and places like that were not lasting on my pieces. And a friend had gifted this to me. It was just extra stuff he was moving. He didn't want it. And I know people are probably cringing if you normally paint Nerf guns, the fact that I am using this stuff. Like, what is this? There's not even a rattle ball in it. This is crazy, Doc! But this stuff actually works really, really great. And I've used it on Nerf guns pretty much primarily ever since then. And what I did on this was I did a couple of thin coats on the main body. But on the handle here in particular, I put on 3 heavy coats, and that was really to give this wooded area a nice high gloss shine and really brought out the brown, I feel. And both of these, that made them both look pretty freaking sweet. So now that these have had 24 hours to dry and are now ready to reassemble, I'm going to put this back together with all the internals in it and try it out. Alrighty, I put it back together, and I also used some silver paint on the logo. And over here on the other side, I put the Z from the logo on my main channel, just kind of a way of showing that I made this. And that's pretty much it for the painting and disassembly. Now it's time to see if this will still fire. So one thing I noticed on the first one we used about a while ago was that the bottom barrel has a significant drop and loss in power. I didn't test this or any kind of chronograph reading, I just noticed it by aiming and firing it and how far each of them go. Of course, there's enough videos out there with chrono readings that'll show the top one is firing usually 10 to 15 feet per second faster. And like I said, I did not remove the air restrictor, I just hyped up the spring a little bit. This isn't going to give me a whole lot more power. I'm not trying to make this thing powerful, just a little bit further of a shot and a little bit more accurate. However, if I were to use this, after I fired both barrels, I'd probably only reload the top one. I don't know what it is about the bottom one, it just doesn't have the same effect as quite. Oh yeah, that's a nice stiff hammer pull. Almost feels like a revolver. Let's see, I am going to aim at Groot. If I can get this to focus. There we go. No. Bam! Right in your face, Groot! Alright. Try for the second shot from the bottom barrel, see how that one goes. That one felt pretty good too. So yeah, there is a noticeable increase, I feel, in power. And since I threw silicone grease in the trigger, which the trigger is already really smooth. That's one of the things I like about this. It's smooth. The handle is not the most comfortable. But yeah, this looks super cool now that it's painted. And hopefully this gave you guys some ideas and some inspirations to do your own. And as always, thank you for watching, and if you're watching this video on my other channel, you should go check out my main channel if you're interested in cosplay and things like that.